The steady rhythm of hammer-striking steel echoed through the mist-shrouded valley of Ravencroft, where young Marcus Chen worked diligently at his master's forge. The rising sun cast long shadows across the ancient stone walls of Bernard's smithy, a humble workshop that had served the remote mountain village for over 3 decades. Marcus's strong arms, hardened by 5 years of apprenticeship, moved with practiced precision as he shaped the glowing metal before him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Few who watch the quiet 19-year-old work would have guessed that every strike of his hammer had been guided by the hands of the most feared assassin in the Eastern Kingdoms. Viewers still would have believed that old Bernard, the limping blacksmith who had taken Marcus in as an orphan, was once known as the Phantom Blade, a legend who had brought emperors to their knees and changed the course of dynasties. The morning. Peace was shattered by the thunder of hooves approaching along the mountain path. Marcus looked up, his dark eyes narrowing as 5 riders emerged from the mist. Their leather armor bore the crimson serpent insignia of the Red Fang Brotherhood, mercenaries known for extorting protection money from villages along the trade routes. Marcus recognized their leader instantly, Victor the Viper, whose reputation for cruelty had spread throughout the mountain provinces. Bernard's wizened voice carried from inside the workshop, where he sat mending a broken plowshare. "Remember your breathing, boy, just like I taught you." The old man's words carried a weight beyond their simple meaning, one of countless lessons that had nothing to do with metalwork. Marcus nodded almost imperceptibly, his shoulders relaxing, as he regulated his breath, just as he had done countless times during Bernard's pre-dawn training sessions. The riders dismounted, their boots crunching on the gravel as they approached the forge. Victor's scarred face twisted into a predatory smile as he assessed the workshop. "Fine establishment you've got here," the mercenary leader drawled, running, a gloved hand along a rack of finished tools. "Be a shame if something were to happen to it." His men spread out, casually examining the smithy's wares while keeping their hands close to their weapons. Marcus continued his work, each strike of his hammer precise and controlled. He could feel Victor's growing irritation at being ignored. The mercenary's hand shot out, grabbing Marcus's wrist in mid-swing. "Boy, when your betters speak to you, you show proper respect." In that moment, Marcus's muscles tensed with the memory of countless hours spent learning to break holds and counterattacks. Bernard had drilled these movements into him until they were as natural as breathing. But the old man's voice rang in his head. "A true warrior's greatest victory is the battle never fought." "My apologies, sir," Marcus said quietly, lowering his hammer. "The metal requires constant attention while it's hot. How may I assist you?" Victor released his grip with a contemptuous shove. "That's better. Now then, we're offering protection services to businesses along this road. Times are dangerous. Bandits, thieves, all manner of threats. For a modest weekly fee, we ensure nothing unfortunate occurs." Bernard emerged from the workshop, leaning heavily on his gnarled walking stick. His weathered face betrayed no emotion as he surveyed the scene. "We're simple craftsmen," he said, his voice carrying the rough edge of age. "Our work barely provides enough to get by. We have nothing worth protecting." One of Victor's men, a brute with a badly healed broken nose, laughed harshly. "Might surprise you how much damage accidents can cause. Forge fires are particularly dangerous, spread quickly to nearby buildings." He picked up a finely crafted dagger from the display rack. "Quality work through. Shame if it all went up in smoke." Marcus watched Bernard's hands tighten almost imperceptibly on his walking stick. The young apprentice knew that simple piece of wood was crafted from rare Shadowheart oak, as strong as steel and perfectly balanced. He had seen Bernard practicing with it in the pre-dawn hours, moving with a grace and speed that belied his apparent infirmity. "Perhaps we could work out a payment plan," Bernard suggested mildly, though Marcus detected the dangerous undercurrent in his master's voice. Return tomorrow, and we can discuss terms. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, old man, that's not how this works. We need a show of good faith today. He drew his sword, using it to point at the rack of finished weapons. Those ought to cover your first month of protection. Marcus felt the familiar calm settling over him, the state of focused awareness Bernard had spent years helping him cultivate. He noted the positions of all 5 men, catalogued their weapons, and observed their stances. His hands itched to demonstrate the deadly skills his master had taught him in secret. But Bernard's most important lesson echoed in his mind. Power lies not in revealing your strength, but in knowing when to hold it in reserve. Take them, Bernard said with a resigned sigh, but please, leave us enough tools to continue our work. We cannot pay you if we cannot craft. Victor laughed, gesturing for his men to begin loading the weapons. Wise choice, old man. We'll return next week for our regular payment. Don't disappoint us. He turned to Marcus with a sneer, and teach your boy better manners before then. As the mercenaries rode away with their ill-gotten gains, Marcus turned to his master. We could have stopped them, he said quietly, the frustration evident in his voice. You taught me how to deal with their kind. Bernard placed a gnarled hand on his apprentice's shoulder. Yes, we could have. And then what? They would return with more men, or burn the village in revenge. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in appearing weak. He smiled slightly. Besides, those weapons they took, the steel is flawed. They'll shatter at the worst possible moment. Marcus's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Every piece they had taken had been carefully crafted to appear perfect while harboring hidden weaknesses. His master had anticipated something like this and prepared accordingly. Come, Bernard said, turning back to the workshop. We have much work to do before they return, and much to discuss about the path that lies ahead. Marcus nodded, returning to his forge. But now each strike of his hammer carried a new purpose. The lessons of both blacksmith and assassin would soon be put to the test, and he would need every skill his master had taught him to protect their home and way of life. The true tempering was about to begin. As dusk approached, Marcus watched villagers hurrying past the smithy, their faces tight with worry as word of the Red Fang Brotherhood's presence spread through Ravencroft. Mei Lin, the herb merchant's daughter, paused at their door, her usual cheerful demeanor dampened by concern. Marcus, I heard about what happened, she said softly, setting down a small basket of medicinal herbs. Father says they've been terrorizing villages all along the trade route. 3 settlements have already burned for resisting them. Marcus felt the familiar tension in his shoulders, the instinct to act that Bernard had spent years teaching him. To control. Mei Lin had been one of the few to welcome him when Bernard first brought him to Ravencroft, back when he was a scared 12-year-old orphan with too many questions in his eyes. We'll manage, he assured her, though his eyes remained fixed on the mountain path where the mercenaries had disappeared. Your father's herbs are too valuable to waste on us. They're not a waste, she insisted. Besides, Master Bernard's remedies have helped half the village through winter fever. It's the least we can do. She hesitated, then added, Be careful, Marcus. There's something different about these men. They enjoy hurting people. Inside the workshop, Bernard was examining a strange piece of parchment that had arrived by messenger hawk that morning. His face bore the same concentrated focus Marcus had seen during their secret training sessions in the hidden cave behind the waterfall. Master, Marcus questioned, noting how quickly Bernard tucked the parchment away. The world is changing, boy, the old man said, his voice carrying that odd resonance it got when he spoke of deeper truths. The shadows I left behind are stirring again. Those men today, they're not simple bandits. That serpent insignia carries meaning to those who know where to look. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. The red serpent was the symbol of the Phoenix dynasty before their fall, the same dynasty that... He trailed off, seeing the dark memory pass across his master's face. The same dynasty that hired the Phantom Blade for their last desperate mission, Bernard finished. Yes, and now their descendants are gathering power again, through proxies like the Red Fang Brotherhood. He gestured to the weapons they had, left displayed. Watch how I prepare these pieces. Every blade, every joint, every seemingly decorative element serves a purpose. As Bernard demonstrated, Marcus recognized the subtle techniques that went far beyond ordinary smithing. The hidden channels in the sword hilts that could hold poison or antidote. The seemingly ornamental crossguards that could be twisted to release concealed blades. The imperfections in the metal that would cause catastrophic failures if someone attempted certain lethal strikes. Your father taught you these techniques, Marcus said quietly, remembering the rare occasions Bernard spoke of the legendary weaponsmith, who had first set him on his path, and his father before him. Bernard nodded. Our craft has always served two purposes, to create tools that build and weapons that deal death. The wisdom lies in knowing which is needed, and more importantly, when to withhold either. As night fell, they continued their work by lamplight, Bernard's instruction now carrying an urgency Marcus hadn't felt since his earliest training days. Each hammer strike taught more than metalwork. Each carefully shaped piece contained lessons that went far beyond the forge. Later, in the small hours before dawn, Marcus found himself in the hidden cave where Bernard had trained him in the secret arts of the Phantom Blade. The waterfall's constant rush masked any sounds that might escape, while the phosphorescent cave moss provided just enough light to practice by. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. As he moved through the forms Bernard had taught him, each stance flowing into the next. Like water, Marcus reflected on how different his life might have been. He remembered the day Bernard had found him, a half-starved street child trying to pick the old man's pocket in the crowded markets of the capital. Instead of punishment, Bernard had offered him a choice: continue down the path of desperate survival, or learn to create something meaningful with his hands and his life. Only years later did Marcus understand that his master had seen something in him that day, the same combination of qualities that had once made Bernard himself such a legendary figure. The discipline of the forge had given focus to Marcus's natural agility and quick mind. The patience required for crafting fine metalwork had tempered his youthful impulsiveness, and Bernard's deeper lessons about power, responsibility, and the true meaning of strength had shaped him in ways that went far beyond physical skill. As Marcus completed his forms, he realized that everything in his training, both as a smith and as a warrior, had been preparing him for what was coming. The Red Fang Brotherhood's arrival was no coincidence, and their connection to his masters past meant Ravencroft was about to become the center of something far larger than a simple extortion scheme. Returning to the smithy as the first light of dawn painted the mountains, Marcus found Bernard already at work, his gnarled hands moving with surprising grace as he marked strange symbols on the underside of a blade. Their eyes met in silent understanding. The time for hiding their true strengths was coming to an end. The hammer's ring against the anvil took on a different tone that morning, not the steady rhythm of honest work, but the sharp, clear notes of preparation for battle. 3 days after the Red Fang Brotherhood's visit, an unusual quiet had settled over Ravencroft. The normal bustle of village life had given way to furtive movements and whispered conversations. Children no longer played in the streets, and the evening market closed well before sunset. Even the mountain winds seemed to hold their breath, waiting. In the smithy, Marcus discovered a side of his master he'd never seen before. Bernard's teachings took on a new intensity as he revealed sophisticated techniques that blended metallurgy with deadly purpose. The old man worked with renewed vigor, his apparent limp less pronounced when he thought no one was watching. "Pay attention to the folding pattern," Bernard instructed, working on a seemingly ordinary short sword. "See how the steel ripples? Each layer contains different carbon content." His scarred hands moved with surgical precision as he etched microscopic patterns into the metal. When it strikes another blade at the correct angle, the harmonics will shatter the opposing weapon. Marcus absorbed every detail, recognizing that his master was sharing secrets that hadn't been taught in generations. "These aren't common smithing techniques," he observed, studying the complex geometric patterns emerging on the blade's surface. "No," Bernard agreed, his voice distant with memory. "These methods were developed by the Shadowless Forge, an ancient guild that served the first emperor of the Eastern Kingdoms. They understood that true mastery of metal meant understanding its music, its mathematics, its very soul." He passed his hand over the blade, and the patterns seemed to shimmer in the forge light. The phantom blade was their last apprentice. Before Marcus could ask more questions, hurried footsteps approached the smithy. Mei Lin burst in, her usual grace forgotten in her haste. "Marcus, Master Bernard, they're burning the granary at Crow's Pass." Bernard's expression hardened. "The Brotherhood?" "Yes," Mei Lin caught her breath. "They demanded payment from the village council. When they refused," she shuddered. "The survivors are fleeing this way. They say Victor's men took pleasure in the destruction." Marcus moved toward the weapon rack, but Bernard's voice stopped him. "Not yet." The old man's tone carried an edge of steel. "Rushing to fight reveals your strength too soon. Remember the third principle. The blade that strikes first often breaks first," Marcus quoted, though his hands clenched in frustration. "But Master, innocent people are suffering, and more will suffer if we don't proceed carefully." Bernard retrieved a worn leather scroll from a hidden compartment beneath the forge. "The Red Fang Brotherhood isn't acting alone. Their attacks follow a pattern." He unrolled the scroll, revealing a map marked with recent raids. "They're systematically isolating the mountain passes, cutting off escape routes. This isn't mere banditry, it's military strategy." Mei Lin studied the map, her quick mind connecting the implications. "They're creating a net, but what are they trying to catch?" Bernard's answer was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Chen, Ravencroft's senior council member. The usually dignified man looked haggard with worry. "Master Bernard, the council requests your guidance. Refugees are arriving with nothing but the clothes they wear. Our food stores won't last a month with so many extra mouths to feed." "And winter approaches," Bernard mused, though Marcus noted how his master's eyes never left the map. "What of the mountain patrols?" "No word for 2 days," Elder Chen replied. "The usual signal fires haven't been lit. We fear the worst." Marcus watched his master's face, recognizing the subtle signs of rapid calculation behind his calm exterior. Bernard had taught him to read people as carefully as he read metal, and now those lessons revealed volumes in the old man's minute. "Expressions, we'll help how we can," Bernard assured the elder. "Marcus, prepare the workshop. We'll need to fashion tools for temporary shelters." Once Elder Chen had left, Bernard turned to Mei Lin. "Your father's herb stores, how many healing poultices can he prepare on short notice?" "Several dozen if I help him," she answered. "But wouldn't weapons be more useful now?" Bernard's smile carried a hint of his hidden nature. "The best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you possess. For now, we help these people survive. But while we work—" He gestured to the complex blade patterns he'd been teaching Marcus. "We prepare." That afternoon, as refugees began trickling into Ravencroft, Marcus worked the forge with new purpose. Each tool he crafted contained subtle modifications. A shovel blade perfectly balanced for defensive fighting, a hammerhead weighted for throwing, tent stakes that could double as throwing knives. Bernard supervised every piece, adding his own mysterious modifications when he thought others weren't watching. As dusk approached, Marcus noticed more detail in the refugees' stories. The Brotherhood's attacks weren't random acts of violence. They followed a careful progression. Villages that surrendered immediately were merely stripped of valuables. Those that showed any resistance were burned, their survivors left to spread terror through the mountains, their herding people, Marcus realized, sharing his insight with Bernard as they worked. Each attack drives survivors in specific directions. But why Ravencroft? We're not strategically important, aren't we? Bernard tested the edge of a newly forged blade, his expression thoughtful. Consider our location, the valley's natural walls, the hidden caves, the underground hot springs that ensure we never freeze completely. He pointed to an ancient stone foundation near the village center. Those ruins aren't from a simple mountain temple. This was once a fortress of the Phoenix dynasty. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. The Brotherhood's masters want to reclaim it, create a hidden stronghold in the mountains. His eyes widened with another realization. And they're using the refugees to find all the secret paths and caves as they flee here. Good. Bernard nodded approvingly. You're seeing the layers now. Just as true smithing involves understanding how metal moves beneath the surface, true strategy requires reading the currents that flow beneath events. That evening, Bernard led Marcus through a new set of training exercises in their hidden cave. The forms were unlike anything he'd taught before. Techniques specifically designed for fighting in narrow mountain passes and confined spaces. Each movement was precise, economical, deadly. These are shadowless forge combat forms, Bernard explained as they practiced, created for protecting mountain strongholds against overwhelming odds. He demonstrated a particularly complex sequence that made his walking stick seem to vanish and reappear from multiple angles. The Brotherhood's masters know many ancient combat arts, but these techniques were specifically created to counter them. Why didn't you teach me these before? Marcus asked, attempting to replicate the subtle movements. Because until now, you weren't ready to understand their true purpose. Bernard corrected his stance with a gentle tap of his stick. These forms aren't just about fighting. They're about controlling space, about turning an enemy's strength against them. The Shadowless Forge built hidden defenses throughout these mountains. Knowing these forms is the key to activating them. Their practice was interrupted by a distant horn blast, 3 short notes followed by a long wail. The refugee warning signal. More survivors were approaching the village, but when they emerged from the cave, they found Mei Lin waiting with disturbing news. These refugees are different, she reported quietly. They're too well fed for people who fled their homes, and their clothes show no sign of fire or travel damage. Bernard's expression darkened. So it begins. They're infiltrating spies among the real refugees. He turned to Marcus. Remember when I taught you to test metal's true nature by its ring? When Marcus nodded, he continued. People reveal their nature the same way. Watch how they move. Listen to how their stories sound against each other. Truth has its own harmony. That night, as Marcus made his rounds helping the refugees settle, he found himself applying his master's lessons in new ways. He noticed small discrepancies. A supposed farmer with uncalloused hands, a fleeing mother who carried her baby wrong, merchants whose knowledge of trade routes was suspiciously incomplete. He shared his observations with Bernard in the privacy of their forge, where the constant ring of the hammer masked their words. The old master nodded grimly. They're assessing our defenses, mapping our resources. Soon they'll signal the Brotherhood that we're ripe for attack. His eyes took on a dangerous gleam, which is exactly what we want them to think. We're letting them spy on us? Marcus asked, understanding dawning as he spoke. Because everything they see is exactly what we've prepared for them to see, Bernard finished. Remember, boy, a blade's true strength isn't always visible on its surface. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one that appears to be something else entirely. As they worked late into the night, preparing for the challenges ahead, Marcus realized that his years of training had been building toward this moment. Every lesson in metalwork, every secret combat form, every taught principle of strategy was a piece of a larger design. Bernard hadn't just been training a blacksmith or even an assassin. He'd been preparing a protector for these mountains and their people. The hammer's ring carried through the quiet night, its rhythm speaking of preparation and purpose. In the shadows of the forge, master and apprentice worked with quiet intensity, knowing that soon the true test of their bond and their skills would begin. Near midnight, an unexpected visitor arrived at the smithy's back door. Master Wei, Mei Lin's father, carried a cloth-wrapped bundle and a troubled expression. The renowned herbalist rarely left his shop after dark, making his presence all the more significant. The refugees brought disturbing news, Wei whispered, after ensuring they were alone. The Brotherhood's raids have been accompanied by strange illnesses, people falling ill with symptoms I've never seen before. He unwrapped his bundle, revealing dried plants Marcus didn't recognize. These were found growing near destroyed villages. They're not native to our mountains. Bernard examined the plants with unusual intensity. Ghost lotus, he muttered, and black mirror fungus, both key ingredients in shadow mist poison. He met Wei's worried gaze. They're preparing for more than just conquest. Shadow mist? Marcus questioned, noting how both older men seemed to pale at the term. A weapon of last resort, developed by the Phoenix dynasty's assassins, Bernard explained grimly. It doesn't just kill, it breaks the mind first, turns victims against their own people. In the final days of the dynasty, they plan to use it to cleanse entire regions of resistance. His voice carried the weight of personal knowledge. The Phantom Blade's last mission wasn't an assassination. It was preventing them from unleashing this poison on the innocent. Wood nodded solemnly. I've prepared what antidotes I can, based on old texts. But without knowing their exact formula. I know it, Bernard interrupted quietly. I made sure to learn it. After everything. The knowledge was too dangerous. To preserve, but too vital to lose entirely. He turned to Marcus. Remember how I taught you to read the color of heated metal? How certain hues reveal its true nature? When Marcus nodded, he continued, the same principle applies to poison crafting. The wrong mixture reveals itself in subtle ways, if you know how to look. Over the next hour, Bernard shared ancient knowledge with Wei, while Marcus absorbed another layer of his master's complex past. The old herbalist took rapid notes as Bernard detailed detection methods and treatment protocols, his earlier unease giving way to focused determination. As Wei prepared to leave, he paused. There's something else. My contacts in the capital report unusual movements. The old families are stirring, especially those with ties to the Phoenix dynasty. They speak of restoration and reclaiming forgotten glories. They believe taking these mountains is their first step back to power, Bernard mused. The high passes, the hidden fortresses, the ancient routes only locals know. He shook his head. History repeats itself, but never quite the same way twice. After Wei departed, Marcus helped Bernard prepare the forge for a special project. The old master retrieved metals Marcus had never seen before from a hidden cache beneath the workshop floor, strange alloys that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Shadow steel, Bernard explained as they began working the rare metal. The secret of its making was thought lost with the shadowless forge. It has unique properties, Properly crafted, it can disperse poison mists, deflect certain types of magic, even turn darkness itself into a weapon. As they worked through the night, Bernard shared more of the hidden knowledge he'd carried for decades. Each technique was a piece of living history, preserved not in scrolls or monuments, but in the practical wisdom passed from master to apprentice. Dawn found them completing a set of specially crafted tokens, each marked with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. Bernard distributed them to trusted villagers, Wei, Elder Chen, and a few others who could be counted on to recognize infiltrators among the refugees. Remember, Bernard instructed as he handed out the tokens, these aren't just identification marks. When needed, they can be activated with specific movements. They'll help coordinate our defense when the time comes. He demonstrated a subtle gesture that made his token momentarily glow with an inner light. The Shadowless Forge built layers of protection into these mountains. We're just waking them up. Marcus watched the distribution with new understanding. Every lesson Bernard had taught him, every seemingly simple technique, contained deeper layers of meaning and purpose. The forge wasn't just a place of crafting, it was a guardian of ancient knowledge, a beacon of protection in increasingly dark times. As the first light of dawn painted the mountain peaks, master and apprentice stood watching their village prepare for the challenges ahead. The refugees, both genuine and disguised, continued to arrive, each group bringing new tensions and complications. But now they were ready to begin separating truth from deception, allies from enemies. The real test, Bernard said quietly, isn't just surviving what's coming. It's protecting what matters without becoming what we fight against. He placed a gnarled hand on Marcus's shoulder. The Shadowless Forge understood that true strength lies not in the weapon, but in the heart of the one who wields it. Remember that in the days ahead. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling over him like a well-forged blade, heavy with purpose but perfectly balanced for the task at hand. The quiet before dawn filled with possibility and purpose, each breath bringing them closer to the moment when all their preparation would be tested. A week into the refugee crisis, Ravencroft's transformation became impossible to ignore. The once quiet mountain village now hummed with barely contained tension. Makeshift shelters dotted the valley floor, while smoke from dozens of cooking fires created a perpetual haze that hung in the crisp autumn air. Marcus moved among the newcomers, delivering tools and performing repairs, all while watching for the signs Bernard had taught him to recognize. His trained eye caught subtle details, the way certain groups positioned themselves with clear sightlines, to the village's key structures, how they probed for information about the mountain paths with carefully casual questions. But this morning was different. Something had changed in the atmosphere, like the charged feeling before a lightning strike. Marcus noticed the spies among the refugees had grown bolder, less careful about concealing their true nature. It was almost as if they no longer cared about maintaining their cover. His suspicions were confirmed when Mei Lin intercepted him near the village well, her face tight with worry. 3 more groups left before dawn, she whispered, pretending to adjust his tool belt. All of them were ones you identified as infiltrators. They took the north path toward Thunder Pass. Marcus nodded grimly. They've gathered enough information. Now they're regrouping with the Brotherhood. He glanced at the mountains, where storm clouds gathered around the distant peaks. How many remain behind? At least 12 that we know of, she replied. Father says they've been asking strange questions about the cave systems and underground springs. And Marcus, she hesitated. They've started wearing gloves, even in the warmth of the day. Father thinks they're protecting their hands from something. The implication sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He remembered Bernard's warnings about shadow mist poison and its effects. Have your father prepare more antidotes, I need to speak with my master." But when Marcus reached the smithy, he found Bernard deep in conversation with a stranger, a weather-beaten man wearing the simple robes of a mountain hermit. The stranger's calloused hands and the way he carried himself told Marcus this was no ordinary holy man. "Ah, Marcus," Bernard called out, his tone carefully neutral. "This is Brother Ash. He brings news from the high temples." The emphasis on the word temples carried hidden meaning. It was one of their code words for the scattered survivors of the Shadowless Forge. Brother Ash studied Marcus with penetrating eyes. "So, this is your new apprentice, old friend. You've taught him our ways?" "Everything I could," Bernard replied, "though some lessons can only come through experience." The hermit nodded, then retrieved a small bundle from his robes. Inside was a piece of dark metal unlike anything Marcus had seen. It seemed to bend light around itself, making it difficult to focus on its true shape. "Void steel," Brother Ash explained, "the last remnant of the Forge's highest art. We've saved it for a moment like this." He turned to Bernard. "The signs are clear. They're not just trying to reclaim the old fortress. They're attempting to recreate the Phoenix dynasty's final ritual." Bernard's expression hardened. "Impossible. The knowledge was destroyed. I made sure of it myself." "Not all of it," Brother Ash countered. "They found fragments in the sealed archives beneath the capital, pieces of the formula, parts of the incantation. They've spent decades trying to reconstruct it. And now," he gestured to the surrounding mountains, "they believe these peaks hold the final keys they need." Marcus listened intently, understanding flowing beneath the cryptic exchange. The Brotherhood's campaign wasn't just about territorial control. They were pursuing something far darker, something connected to the fall of the Phoenix dynasty and his master's hidden past. "The ritual requires 3 elements," Brother Ash continued. "The sacred geometry of a mountain fortress built on ley lines, the concentrated essence of shadow mist poison, and—" He met Bernard's gaze meaningfully. "The blood of one who's mastered the highest arts of the Shadowless Forge." Bernard's hand tightened on his walking stick. "They're not just coming for the village, they're coming for me." "For both of you," Brother Ash corrected. "The ritual can be powered by either master or apprentice, as long as the knowledge flows in their veins." He placed the void steel on Bernard's workbench. "This can be forged into a defense against their magic, but it requires skills I no longer possess. The work must be done by those who still practice the true arts." As if in response to his words, a distant horn echoed through the valley, the signal for approaching riders. Marcus rushed to the door, expecting to see the Brotherhood's advanced scouts. Instead, he witnessed something far more chilling. The infiltrators who had remained in the village were moving with coordinated purpose, donning masks and removing hidden weapons from their disguised bundles. At the same time, strange mists began, seeping from the ground around the village perimeter, thin tendrils of shadow mist poison that had been carefully planted over the past week. "They're not waiting for the Brotherhood," Marcus realized. "They're creating chaos from within." Bernard moved with surprising speed, retrieving wrapped bundles from their hidden cache. "Quick now, there's no more time for secrets. Brother Ash, help Marcus with the void steel. I'll alert our allies." He pressed one of the shadow steel tokens into Marcus's hand. "Remember everything I taught you about reading metal's nature. Void steel is like looking into a mirror that shows what isn't. There, you have to forge it by feeling rather than sight." As Bernard disappeared into the growing chaos, Brother Ash guided Marcus to the forge. The hermit's movements were precise and practiced, revealing years of training similar to Bernard's. "Your master tells me you understand the deeper harmonies of metal," he said as they worked. "Show me." Marcus took the void steel in his hands, letting his trained senses explore its strange properties. The metal seemed to resonate with frequencies he'd never encountered, vibrations that spoke of spaces between spaces. Following instinct and training, he began to work the mysterious material. As they forged, Brother Ash shared vital knowledge. The Phoenix dynasty's ritual was designed to create permanent shadows, areas where their dark magic would hold eternal sway. But they didn't understand the true cost. Such power demands balance. Create too much shadow, and you destroy the light that defines it, Marcus finished, understanding flowing through him like molten metal taking shape. That's why the Shadowless Forge developed these techniques, not to master darkness, but to maintain harmony between light and shadow. Their work was interrupted by screams from the village center. The shadow mist was spreading faster now, and some of the infiltrators had begun herding people toward the cave systems. Their true purpose became clear. They weren't trying to kill the villagers, but to drive them underground where the ritual's power would be strongest. "We don't have much time," Brother Ash warned. "The void steel must be ready before they complete the first phase of their ritual. Otherwise..." A massive explosion rocked the valley, followed by the thunder of hoofbeats. The Brotherhood had arrived in force, their timing coordinated with their hidden allies. Through the smithy's window, Marcus saw Victor leading the charge. But something was different about the mercenary leader. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and shadows seemed to writhe around him like living things. "They've already begun the transformation," Brother Ash observed grimly. "Your old enemy has become a vessel for powers he doesn't understand." Marcus returned to the forge with renewed urgency, letting his training guide his hands as he worked. The void steel. Each hammer strike had to be perfect, each fold of the metal precisely calculated. One mistake could shatter the mysterious material, and with it, their hopes of stopping the ritual. As chaos engulfed Ravencroft, Master and Apprentice worked with focused intensity, racing against time to forge a weapon that could pierce the gathering shadows. Through the smithy's windows, Marcus caught glimpses of the unfolding crisis. Wei and his daughter were organizing groups of villagers, distributing the antidote pouches they'd prepared. Elder Chen stood at the village center, the shadow steel token Bernard had given him, glowing with protective energy as he helped coordinate the evacuation of children and elderly to safer ground. But the infiltrators were moving with deadly purpose. Now, their masks allowing them to wade through the poisonous mists unaffected. Marcus saw one group forcing their way into the old temple, carrying strange crystalline objects that pulsed with dark energy. "Focus," Brother Ash commanded, noting Marcus's divided attention. "The void steel responds to intention as much as technique. Your concern for them is honorable, but right now, this is how you can best protect them." Marcus returned to his work, letting his training guide each precise movement. As he folded the mysterious metal, Brother Ash continued sharing. "Critical information. The ritual they're attempting requires 3 phases. First, they'll anchor shadows to sacred points throughout the valley. The temple, the ancient well, the cave of whispers. Then they'll use the shadow mist to create a barrier between our world and the void." "And the third phase?" Marcus asked, carefully quenching the void steel in a solution Brother Ash had prepared. "That's when they'll need the blood sacrifice, either you or Bernard. The knowledge passed down through the Shadowless Forge carries power they intend to corrupt and twist to their purpose." The hermit's eyes narrowed as he examined their work. "But they don't understand. True mastery isn't about controlling shadow or light. It's about maintaining the balance between them." A thunderous crash echoed through the valley as the Brotherhood's forces breached the village's outer defenses. Through gaps in the shadow mist, Marcus saw Victor leading a charge toward the ancient fortress ruins, his form now wreathed in writhing darkness. The mercenary leader's laugh carried an unnatural resonance that sent chills through all who heard it. "His transformation is nearly complete," Brother Ash observed. "The shadows are consuming him from within. Soon there will be nothing left of the man he was." The void steel was taking its final shape now, not a weapon, as Marcus had expected, but something more complex. Under Brother Ash's guidance, they had forged it into a series of interlocking rings, each carved with symbols that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The Shadowless Forge's greatest creation, Brother Ash explained as they assembled the pieces. A key that can lock or unlock the boundaries between light and shadow. In the wrong hands, it could tear those boundaries apart forever, but used correctly, so he was interrupted by Bernard's return. The old master burst through the back door, his walking stick stained with combat. "They've taken the cave system," he reported grimly. "Started the first phase of the ritual. We have minutes at most before—" A piercing shriek cut through the air, and the very ground seemed to vibrate. Dark energy pulsed from the ancient ruins, and the shadows cast by every object began to move independently of their sources. The second phase had begun. Marcus felt a strange, pulling sensation, as if reality itself was being stretched thin. The void steel rings hummed in response, their complex geometry somehow stabilizing the space around them. "It's time," Bernard declared, his voice carrying the weight of decades of preparation. "Marcus, everything I've taught you about metal, about combat, about the balance of forces, it's all led to this moment." He gripped his apprentice's shoulder with fierce pride. "You're ready." Brother Ash began arranging the void steel rings in a precise pattern. The ritual can be countered, but it requires perfect harmony between master and apprentice. The techniques of the Shadowless Forge weren't meant for single practitioners. They demand the unified effort of those who understand both strength and wisdom. Outside, the battle for Ravencroft raged through streets now filled with living shadows. Victor's transformed warriors clashed with villagers wielding Bernard's specially prepared weapons. Way's antidotes provided some protection against the shadow mist, but supplies were running low. Mylin had organized a group of younger villagers to help her father prepare more, working from the knowledge Bernard had shared. Marcus took his position opposite Bernard, the void steel rings suspended between them. Brother Ash began a low chant in an ancient tongue, activating dormant power in the mysterious metal as master and apprentice reached out to grasp the rings. Their years of shared training crystallized into perfect understanding. This was what every lesson had prepared them for, not just the physical techniques of metalwork or combat, but the deeper principles that governed both. The way force flowed through metal and body, the balance between rigidity and flexibility, the harmony that could exist between opposing forces. The true battle for the mountain valley was about to begin, and its outcome would depend not just on skill or strength, but on the deepest mysteries of an ancient art, mysteries preserved through generations of masters and apprentices, waiting for precisely this moment. The void steel rings pulsed with otherworldly energy as Marcus and Bernard took their positions. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat stretching like molten metal being drawn into wire. Through the smithy's windows, Marcus could see the transformed Victor leading his shadow-wreathed warriors toward the ancient fortress ruins, their movements unnaturally fluid in the growing darkness. "Begin with the first harmony," Brother Ash instructed, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "Remember, the rings must move in perfect synchronization. Any discord between master and apprentice will shatter them." Marcus met his master's eyes across the suspended rings, seeing in Bernard's steady gaze the same focused calm he'd shown during countless training sessions. They began the prescribed movements, their hands flowing through patterns that mirrored the complex geometry of the void steel. But something was wrong. The rings' resonance faltered, their harmonics jarring instead of blending. Brother Ash's expression tightened with concern. "The ritual's interference is stronger than expected. They must have found more of the old knowledge than we thought." A Blast of dark energy from the fortress ruins shook the smithy. Through cracks in the walls, shadows began seeping in like liquid ink, carrying with them whispers in an ancient tongue. Marcus recognized the language from Bernard's most secret teachings, the lost dialect of the Phoenix dynasty's shadow priests. "They're trying to disrupt us," Bernard growled, his hands never stopping their precise movements. "Marcus, remember what I taught you about reading metal's voice. Listen beneath the surface noise." Marcus closed his eyes, letting his trained senses explore the void steel's strange properties. Beneath the chaos of the ritual's interference, he detected a subtle pattern, like the crystalline structure of perfectly folded steel, but existing in dimensions he could barely comprehend. "The rings," he said slowly, understanding flowing through him. "They're not just tools, they're a language." "Yes," Brother Ash's excitement was palpable. The shadowless forge didn't just work metal. They learned to speak its primordial tongue. Each ring is a word in that language, and together they form a sentence that can command reality itself. Outside, Victor's voice boomed unnaturally across the valley. "The old fool taught you well, boy, but did he tell you everything? Did he reveal why they really called him the Phantom Blade?" Bernard's rhythm faltered for just a moment, but it was enough to send discordant vibrations through the void steel. Marcus saw pain flash across his master's face. Not physical, but the deeper ache of buried memories. "Don't listen to him," Brother Ash warned. "The shadows speak with borrowed voices, trying to plant seeds of doubt." But Victor's next words froze the blood in Marcus's veins. "Ask him about the night of burning flowers. Ask him what really happened. To your parents." The void steel rings wavered dangerously as Marcus's concentration shattered. "Master?" Bernard's face was a mask of ancient grief. There's only time for truth." Brother Ash interrupted firmly. "The void. Steel demands it. Harmony can't be built on hidden foundations." Bernard met his apprentice's questioning gaze, his hands still moving through the required forms. "Your parents were scholars in the Imperial Library. They discovered texts about the Phoenix dynasty's final ritual, the same knowledge our enemies now seek to use. The Shadow Priest sent me to silence them." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. "I refused the contract," Bernard continued, his voice rough with emotion. "For the first time in my career, I chose to protect instead of kill. I tried to help them escape, to get them to safety, but I underestimated the Shadow Priest's reach." His eyes filled with tears that glinted in the void steel's strange light. "I was too late to save them, but I found you, hidden where your mother tucked you away. I vowed then to protect you, to teach you everything I knew, not for revenge, but so their sacrifice would mean something." The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow, threatening to disrupt his connection to the void steel. But in that moment of crisis, he felt something else, a deeper resonance emanating from the rings. They were responding to the honesty between master and apprentice, the buried truth finally seeing light. "The rings," Brother Ash breathed. "Look." The void steel had begun to glow with inner fire, the symbols carved into its surface shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. The truth between master and apprentice had unlocked something fundamental in the ancient metal. Your parents died, protecting knowledge that could have given them power beyond imagination, Bernard said softly, his movements becoming more sure as the rings stabilized. They chose to defend the balance instead, just as the Shadowless Forge always taught. True strength lies not in dominating forces, but in maintaining their eternal dance. Understanding bloomed in Marcus like steel reaching perfect temperature. Every lesson, every shared moment with Bernard carried new meaning. His master hadn't just taught him metalwork and combat. He'd passed on the very principles his parents died protecting. The void steel sang between them, its harmonics pure and true. But their moment of clarity was interrupted by a sound that shook the very mountains. Victor's forces had begun the ritual's second phase in earnest. Dark energy coursed through the ley lines beneath Ravencroft, and the boundary between shadow and light began to tear. "Now," Brother Ash commanded. "The rings are aligned. Speak the words of unmaking." Bernard began the ancient incantation, his voice carrying power that Marcus had never heard before. The apprentice joined in, the strange syllables feeling natural on his tongue, as if the knowledge had been sleeping in his blood, waiting for this moment. The void steel rings began to spin, faster and faster, their geometry seeming to bend space itself. Through the windows, Marcus saw Victor's transformed figure rear back in sudden fear. The mercenary leader could sense what was happening, could feel the ritual's power being turned back on itself. But then something unexpected happened. The shadows around Victor began to take solid form, shaping themselves into a massive, writhing creature of pure darkness. The mercenary's laugh turned triumphant. "You're too late! The binding is complete!" The shadow beast surged toward the smithy, its substance seeming to devour the very air. Marcus felt Brother Ash's hand on his shoulder and heard the old hermit's urgent whisper, "The third path, remember the third path." In that desperate moment, Marcus recalled one of Bernard's earliest lessons, not about metal or combat, but about choices. There are always three paths, his master had taught. The obvious one, the hidden one, and the one that only reveals itself when you understand the true nature of the problem. Looking at the void steel rings still spinning between them, Marcus suddenly saw what they had been missing. The rings weren't just a weapon or a key, they were a mirror, showing the truth about shadow and light. And in that truth lay their salvation. "Master," Marcus called out over the chaos, "the third form of the mountain stream." Bernard's eyes widened with understanding. The third form was one of their most challenging training exercises, a sequence of movements designed not to defeat an opponent, but to redirect their energy. Like water flowing around a boulder, turning obstacles into opportunity. Together, they began shifting their positions, maintaining contact with the void steel rings while moving in perfect synchronization. The rings' spin changed, creating new patterns in the air between them. Brother Ash watched in amazement as the ancient metal responded to their innovative approach. "Of course," the hermit whispered, "the shadowless forge's greatest insight. Harmony doesn't mean opposing force with force, but finding the balance point where opposites become complementary." The shadow beast crashed against the smithy's walls, its substance eating through wood and stone like acid. But as it poured through the gaps, the void steel ring's rotation created a new kind of space, one where shadow and light weren't enemies, but parts of the same whole. Victor's transformed figure appeared in the doorway, his body now more dark than human. "You can't stop what's already begun," he snarled, his voice echoing with unnatural harmonics. "The Phoenix dynasty's power flows through me." "Look again," Bernard commanded, his tone carrying the authority of decades of mastery. "Look at what that power is doing to you." The void steel rings had become like mirrors, showing Victor's reflection from multiple angles simultaneously. In each reflection, the mercenary leader could see the truth of his transformation, how the shadows weren't empowering him, but consuming him, replacing his substance with their own. "Impossible," Victor stammered, but doubt had crept into his otherworldly voice. Marcus felt the void steel responding to Victor's uncertainty. The rings don't just reflect light and shadow, he realized aloud. They reflect the truth itself. "The final teaching of the shadowless forge," Brother Ash confirmed. "Their greatest weapons weren't forged from steel, but from unwavering truth." As if triggered by these words, the void steel rings began emitting a high, clear note, pure as mountain spring water and sharp as a perfectly honed blade. The sound cut through the ritual's dark energy, creating ripples in the fabric of reality itself. Outside, the transformed Brotherhood warriors faltered as the note spread through the valley. The shadow beast writhed, its substance beginning to dissolve where the sound touched it. Victor stumbled backward, clutching his head as the truth, reflected in the rings, forced him to see what he had become. But the ritual's power fought back. Dark energy surged through the ley lines with renewed force, and the shadows began taking new forms. Shapes from ancient nightmares, creatures that had haunted humanity's dreams since time immemorial. They're drawing on deeper wells of power, Brother Ash warned. The Phoenix dynasty didn't just master shadows, they learned to tap into the primordial darkness that existed before light itself. Marcus felt the strain as they struggled to maintain. The void steals harmony against this new onslaught. His arms burned with effort, and he could see exhaustion etching deeper lines in Bernard's face. Even their perfect synchronization might not be enough against power this ancient and raw. Then, through the chaos, Marcus heard a familiar voice. Mei Lin stood in the doorway, supporting her father. Wei's hands moved in precise gestures as he cast herbs into the air, herbs that glowed with their own subtle light where they fell. The mountain flowers that bloom in darkness, Wei called out. Remember, every shadow creates its own answering light. The herbalist's words triggered another memory in Marcus, one of his earliest lessons with Bernard. They had been working late at the forge, and his master had shown him how the hottest part of the flame created the darkest shadows, but also made nearby objects glow more brightly. "Master," Marcus said urgently, "the shadow-walking stance." "What? If we—" "Yes," Bernard nodded, already adjusting his grip on the rings. "Brother Ash, we'll need your voice. The third canticle." The hermit began chanting in the ancient tongue, but this time the words weren't commands or bindings. They were an invitation, calling to the light that naturally arose in response to darkness. All around Ravencroft, tiny points of illumination began appearing. Flowers growing in the ruins glowed within a fire. Crystal formations in the caves emitted soft radiance. Even the quartz veins running through the mountain rock began to shimmer with their own light. "Everything seeks balance," Bernard said, his voice carrying the weight of ultimate truth. "That's what the Phoenix dynasty never understood. They thought absolute darkness would give them absolute power. But darkness itself calls forth light," Marcus finished, feeling the wisdom of generations flowing through him. Just as the hottest forge casts the deepest shadows, but makes the metal glow brightest, the void steel rings spun faster, their geometry now incorporating this deeper understanding. The note they emitted changed, becoming a chord that contained both shadow and light, darkness and illumination, perfectly balanced. Victor screamed as the truth became undeniable. The shadows possessing him began to dissolve, unable to maintain their hold in the presence of such perfect harmony. Around the valley, his transformed warriors began returning to human form, the dark power flowing out of them like water from a broken vessel. But Marcus knew the battle wasn't over. The void steel rings showed him one final truth: the rituals. Power had to go somewhere. The balance they'd struck was temporary, and if they couldn't find a way to ground all that dark energy safely, it would tear reality apart trying to escape. The dark energy displaced from Victor and his warriors swirled through Ravencroft like a storm seeking ground. The void steel rings continued their harmonious spin between Marcus and Bernard, but the strain of maintaining balance was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on the apprentice's forehead as he fought to hold the complex geometric patterns steady. "The energy needs a vessel," Brother Ash warned, his voice tight with urgency. "Something to contain it safely until it can dissipate naturally." "The old fortress," Bernard suggested, his arms trembling with effort. Its foundations were built to channel power. But Marcus shook his head, another of his master's lessons surfacing in his mind. "The ruins are too unstable. All that power would collapse them, maybe take half the mountain with them." His trained eye had noticed hairline cracks in the ancient stonework, weaknesses that would shatter under such pressure. Through the spinning rings, Marcus caught glimpses of the chaos outside. The surviving Brotherhood warriors were fleeing, their shadows no longer responding to their commands. Victor lay unconscious near the smithy door, his body returning to human form as the last traces of dark power leached away. But the displaced energy was growing more volatile, creating distortions in the air that bent light in impossible ways. Mei Lin rushed into the workshop, her father's medicine bag slung over her shoulder. "The caves!" she gasped. "Something's happening in the deep caves. The underground springs are starting to glow." Wei followed behind her, his herbalist's training letting him sense things others might miss. "The water carries memories," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "The ancient ones who built this place, they left something waiting beneath the earth." Brother Ash's eyes widened. "Of course! The Shadowless Forge didn't just build above ground. Their greatest works were hidden, deep beneath the mountains." A tremor shook the valley as the uncontained power sought release. The void steel rings hummed at a new frequency, responding to something far below. Marcus felt the vibration in his bones, recognizing it as similar to the resonance of perfectly tempered metal. "There's a forge down there," he realized. "Not just any forge, one built by the ancient masters themselves." Bernard nodded grimly. "The Heart Forge. I'd heard rumors, but never found proof of its existence. The place where the Shadowless Forge created their greatest works." "Can it contain this much power?" Marcus asked, feeling the dark energy pressing against their protective harmony. "It was designed to do more than contain," Brother Ash explained. "The Heart Forge could transform energy itself, turning darkness into light, destruction into creation. But reaching it," he gestured to the chaos outside, "the path will be dangerous." Marcus studied the void steel rings, noting how their rotation had begun matching the deep resonance from below. An idea formed, dangerous, but possible. "We don't need to reach it physically. The rings are already connected with it. If we can match its frequency perfectly, we could create a channel," Bernard finished, understanding his apprentice's insight. "Use the ring's geometry to direct the energy down to the Heart Forge." Pride flickered in his eyes. "You've learned to see beneath the surface of things." But Brother Ash raised a warning hand. "Such a channel would need to be maintained from both ends. Someone would have to go down there, brave whatever guardians the Ancient Ones left behind, and activate the forge itself." Before anyone could respond, Mei Lin stepped forward. "I'll go. I know these caves better than anyone except Marcus. My father's herbs can light the way, and I can move quietly when needed." "Not alone," Wei insisted, already sorting through his medicine bag. "Some of these cave plants have properties we'll need, properties that only a trained herbalist can properly use." Marcus wanted to protest, to protect them from the dangers that surely waited below. But he saw the determination in Mei Lin's eyes, the same strength that had helped her survive countless mountain winters and care for sick villagers who others had abandoned. "The third law of metal," Bernard said softly, reminding his apprentice of another vital lesson. "True strength reveals itself when tested." Another tremor rocked the valley, stronger this time. Dark energy coalesced into writhing tendrils that probed the air like hungry serpents. They had minutes at most before the power broke free of all control. "Go," Marcus told Mei Lin, trying to put everything he felt into that single word. "But take this." With careful precision, he used one hand to remove a single link from his apprentice's chain, the one Bernard had given him on his first day of training. "It's shadow steel. It will resonate with the rings and help guide you to the forge." Wei produced a bundle of rare cave flowers, their petals already beginning to glow with borrowed light. Brother Ash quickly taught them a simple chant in the ancient tongue, not enough for complex workings, but sufficient to activate any protections they might encounter. As Mei Lin and her father disappeared into the cave entrance, Marcus returned his full attention to the void steel rings. The geometric patterns were shifting again, responding to the shadow steel link now moving deeper into the earth. Bernard adjusted his stance, compensating for the change in energy flow. "Remember," Brother Ash instructed, "the channel must be perfectly maintained. Any disruption could release all that power at once." Outside, the remaining villagers had begun gathering around the smithy, drawn by the void steel's ethereal light. Elder Chen organized them into a protective circle, using the shadow steel tokens Bernard had distributed to create a barrier against the wild energies still seeking escape. Marcus felt a new vibration through the rings. Mei Lin and Wei had reached the first underground chamber. Through his connection to the shadow steel link, he caught brief impressions: phosphorescent fungi growing in impossible patterns, ancient symbols carved into living rock, the distant sound of subterranean waters that had never seen sunlight. But he also sensed other things moving in the deep places beneath the mountain, things that had slept for centuries, guarding secrets left by the shadowless forge, things that were now awakening, drawn by the presence of intruders and the massive energy seeking a new home. "They're not alone down there," he said through gritted teeth, maintaining his grip on the rings, even as concern for Mei Lin threatened his concentration. "No," Bernard agreed, his voice carrying grim knowledge. "The Ancient Ones left more than just forges and fortresses. They left guardians to protect their greatest works. Guardians that even the Phantom Blade knew better than to challenge." Another tremor shook the valley, and Marcus felt the void steel rings growing heavier, as if reality itself was thickening around them. Through their connection to the shadow steel link, he could feel Mei Lin and Wei descending deeper into the mountain's secrets, racing against time to reach the Heart Forge before the gathered power broke free. Suddenly, Marcus felt the shadow steel link pulse with alarm. Through their connection, he sensed Mei Lin and Wei had encountered their first guardian, a massive door of black metal that seemed to drink in the light from their glowing herbs. Ancient mechanisms clicked and whirred within its surface, responding to their presence. "The shadowless gate," Brother Ash breathed, recognizing it from Marcus's description. "One of their greatest defensive works. No force can break it. It can only be opened by one who understands the true nature of metal and shadow." Marcus concentrated on the sensations coming through the link, trying to help guide them. "Mei Lin," he whispered, knowing she could feel his thoughts through the shadow steel's resonance. "Remember what you've seen in the forge, how metal flows, how it speaks." Through their connection, he felt her step forward, placing her hands on the gate's surface. Wei stood behind her, holding the glowing cave flowers high. The door's mechanisms continued their complex dance, but now Marcus could sense something else. The gate was testing them, reading the truth in their hearts, just as the void steel rings had done with Victor. "The gate doesn't just block the path," Bernard explained, his voice strained from maintaining the ring's harmony. "It judges who is worthy to pass." The Ancient Ones believed that the greatest protection came not from strength, but from understanding. Marcus felt Mei Lin's revelation. Through the link, she had spent countless hours watching him work at the forge, learning by observation, even though she never wielded a hammer herself. She understood metal's voice in her own way, through the herbs she gathered from mineral-rich soil, through the medicines she brewed in carefully maintained metal pots. The gate's mechanisms shifted, responding to her insight. Ancient gears turned, and the massive door began to swing open on perfectly balanced hinges that had waited centuries for this moment. But their small victory was overshadowed by a new crisis above ground. The dark energy they were barely containing had begun to take new forms, drawing on the fears and memories of those nearby. Shadowy shapes manifested in the air, echoes of the Phoenix dynasty's fell creatures, fragments of Victor's corrupted warriors, reflections of even older and darker things that lurked in humanity's collective nightmares. The power is becoming more unstable, Brother Ash warned. It's finding patterns to follow, ways to reshape itself. Marcus felt the strain in every muscle as he helped Bernard maintain the void steel's protective geometry. The rings were growing, heavier, as if the very substance of reality was becoming thicker around them. Each perfect pattern they held required more effort than the last. Through the windows, they could see Elder Chen and the villagers struggling to maintain their defensive circle. The shadow steel tokens provided some protection, but the dark energy probed constantly for weaknesses, testing their resolve. "Hold fast," Bernard called out to them, "like the mountain against the storm." Another pulse through the shadow steel link drew Marcus's attention back underground. Mei Lin and Wei had entered a vast chamber beyond the gate, its walls covered in intricate metal work that put even Bernard's finest creations to shame. Channels of some strange, luminescent metal ran through the rock like veins of light. The path of trials, Brother Ash identified it. The final approach to the Heart Forge. Each step will test them in a different way. Marcus watched through their connection as Mei Lin and Wei faced the first trial. The floor beneath them had begun to shift, individual metal plates rising and falling in complex patterns. One wrong step would trigger ancient defensive mechanisms, but Wei's herbalist training had given him an unexpected advantage. He recognized the pattern in the floor's movement. It matched the growth spiral of certain cave plants that coiled around mineral deposits. "Like seeking like," he told his daughter through the link. "The metal remembers the shapes that nature taught it." Together they began making their way across the chamber, Wei reading the patterns while Mei Lin guided their steps. Each successful move brought them closer to their goal, but Marcus could sense something waiting at the chamber's far end, another guardian more dangerous than the gate. Above ground, the situation was deteriorating. Victor had regained consciousness, but the experience of being possessed by shadow had left him changed. He stared at his hands in horror, seeing the lingering traces of darkness beneath his skin. What have I become?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Bernard spoke without taking his eyes off the void steel rings. "You were a vessel for powers you didn't understand, but that vessel can be cleansed if you choose to help us now." Victor looked up at the swirling chaos of dark energy, at the shadowy forms it was creating. Understanding and shame crossed his face. "The Brotherhood. We thought we were gaining power, but we were just being used. The Shadow Priests promised us glory, but they never told us the true price." "There's still time to make a difference. Or choice," Marcus told him, remembering his master's teachings about redemption and balance. The former mercenary leader stood shakily, drawing his sword, but instead of attacking, he turned to face the darkness. "The Brotherhood follows strength," he called out to his remaining warriors. "Show them true strength now. Help protect these people." One by one, the surviving Brotherhood members stepped forward, forming an outer ring around the villagers. They raised their weapons that Marcus and Bernard had secretly prepared with flaws, and found that those imperfections now served a greater purpose. The cracks and weaknesses in the metal created perfect channels for redirecting the dark energy, helping to guide it toward the void steel rings. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus felt Mei Lin and Wei reaching the end of the path of trials. The final guardian awaited them, a construct of pure shadow and steel that had maintained its vigil for centuries. But as it rose to challenge them, Marcus sensed something familiar in its movements. "The forms," he gasped. "It's using the ancient combat forms of the Shadowless Forge." Bernard's eyes widened. "Then they can defeat it, not through force, but through understanding. Every form has its counter, its point of perfect balance." Marcus concentrated on sending his knowledge through the link, sharing everything Bernard had taught him about the old forms. Mei Lin might not be a warrior, but she had watched him practice countless times, just as she had observed his work at the forge. Understanding flowed both ways through their connection as she combined his insights with her own unique perspective. The Guardian attacked with moves not seen in centuries, its shadow steel form flowing like liquid night. But Mei Lin and Wei moved in perfect harmony, reading its patterns just as they read the growth of plants and the mixing of medicines. Each deadly strike was met not with resistance, but with acceptance and redirection. The same principles that governed the void, steel rings above, as above, so below. The ancient maxim of the shadowless forge took on new meaning as events in the depths and on the surface began to synchronize. The heart forge was warming, responding to their approach, while the dark energy above grew more concentrated, ready for its final transformation. The heart forge's awakening sent tremors through the mountain that even those on the surface could feel. Ancient machinery, dormant for centuries, groaned to life in the depths. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus experienced Mei Lin and Wei's awe as they finally entered the legendary chamber. The heart forge made Bernard's workshop look like a child's toy. Vast mechanisms of mysterious alloys filled the cathedral-like space, their surfaces etched with patterns that seemed to move when viewed directly. The forge itself rose from the chamber's center like a metal flower, its petals still closed after centuries of sleep. But it wasn't just a forge, it was an instrument, a tool for reshaping reality itself. The luminescent veins they'd seen earlier all converged here, creating a pattern that Marcus recognized from the void steel ring's geometry. This was what the rings had been trying to show them. A blueprint of perfect harmony between shadow and light, written in metal and stone. The source pattern, Brother Ash breathed, reading Marcus's thoughts through their shared connection to the void steel. The shadowless forge didn't just work with metal, they discovered the underlying mathematics of creation itself. Above, ground, the dark energy had begun moving with new purpose, as if it could sense the heart forge's awakening. The shadowy forms it had created grew more solid, more threatening. Victor and his reformed Brotherhood warriors fought alongside the villagers to maintain their defensive circle, but exhaustion was taking its toll. "We need to hurry," Bernard warned, his arms trembling from the effort of maintaining the void. Steel's harmony. The pattern is trying to complete itself one way or another. Through the link, Marcus guided Mei Lin and Wei toward the forge's control mechanisms. Ancient knowledge flowed through their connection, not just his own training, but echoes of the shadowless forge's wisdom, preserved in the very metal around them. The petals, he sent through the link. They're like a flower seeking light. Each one needs to open in sequence, following the sun's path. Wei understood immediately, recognizing the pattern from certain light-sensitive plants he used in his medicines. He and Mei Lin began moving around the forge's base, touching specific points that caused the massive petals to slowly unfold. But as the heart forge awakened further, something else stirred in the depths. The chamber's shadows deepened, coalescing into forms that made the guardian they'd faced earlier seem trivial. These were the forge's final protectors, manifestations of the very power they sought to control. The shadow judges, Brother Ash, identified them, his voice tight with concern. They test not just ability or understanding, but worthiness itself. They'll look into their hearts, see their deepest truths. Marcus felt Mei Lin's fear through their connection, but also her determination. The shadow judges flowed around her and her father like living ink, their substance occasionally solidifying into almost recognizable shapes. Faces from memory, moments of doubt and triumph, fears and hopes given momentary form. Wei stood firm, his lifetime of healing and helping others giving him a core of pure purpose that the shadows could not corrupt. But as the judges swirled around Mei Lin, Marcus felt her confronting harder truths. Through their link, he experienced her memories, watching him train with Bernard, wishing she could learn those secrets herself. feeling like an outsider despite her father's respect in the village. The burden of knowing her herbs and medicines could mean the difference between life and death. But instead of trying to hide these feelings, Mei Lin faced them directly. "I am who I am," she declared to the shadow judges. "My strength is different from a warrior's or a smith's, but it is no less real." The shadows paused in their examination, seeming to consider her words. Then, to everyone's surprise, they began flowing into the heart forge itself, becoming part of its awakening mechanisms. "Of course," Brother Ash exclaimed, "the final key isn't purity or power, it's honest self-knowledge." The Shadowless Forge understood that true mastery begins with mastering oneself. The Heart Forge's petals continued opening, each movement releasing harmonics that resonated with the void steel rings above. Marcus and Bernard adjusted their positions constantly, maintaining the delicate balance as the two ancient mechanisms began synchronizing across the distance. But this alignment had an unexpected effect. As the forge's power grew stronger, it began pulling at the dark energy they were containing, not just drawing it down, but amplifying it. The shadows above grew more intense, their forms more solid. The defensive circle began to buckle under the increased pressure. "Something's wrong," Victor shouted from his position among the defenders. "The shadows, they're changing." Marcus saw it through the smithy windows. The dark energy was no longer just creating echoes of past forms. It was combining them, evolving into something new. Multiple shadow creatures merged into larger entities, their substance incorporating fragments of memory and fear from everyone. Nearby, the Heart Forge isn't just containing the power, Bernard realized, his voice heavy with new understanding. It's trying to transform it, to complete a process that was interrupted centuries ago. Brother Ash's eyes widened with sudden fear. The Phoenix dynasty's ritual, it wasn't meant to create darkness, but to transform it into something else entirely, something even they couldn't control. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus felt Mei Lin and Wei reaching the same conclusion. As they studied the patterns carved into the Heart Forge's petals, the ancient mechanism wasn't simply a forge for metal. It was designed to transmute energy itself, to distill shadow into its purest essence. But pure shadow is nothing without light to define it, Marcus said, another of Bernard's lessons clicking into place. They never understood that you can't have one without the other. The strain of maintaining the void steel's harmony was becoming almost unbearable. Sweat poured down Marcus's face as he fought to hold the complex patterns steady. He could feel Bernard's exhaustion matching his own, their shared effort, the only thing preventing the dark energy from breaking free completely. Through their connection, he sensed Mei Lin and Wei reaching the Heart Forge's central controls. The final petals were opening, revealing a crystalline core that pulsed with otherworldly energy. But as they prepared to activate it, a new presence made itself known in the chamber. From the deepest shadows stepped a figure that seemed composed. Of living darkness, one of the Phoenix dynasty's original shadow priests, preserved through centuries by the very power they had sought to control. Its voice echoed with the weight of ages as it addressed Mei Lin and Wei. "You think you can undo our work? The transformation must be completed. It is written in the very fabric of reality itself." Marcus felt Brother Ash's shock through their shared connection to the void steel. Impossible. They all died in the dynasty's fall. "Not dead," Bernard corrected grimly. "Transformed. This is what I truly fought in Deadwood, not just assassins and shadow priests, but the lingering echoes of their final ritual." The shadow priest raised its hands, and the Heart Forge's harmonics changed. The dark energy above began pouring down more rapidly, threatening to overwhelm their carefully maintained balance. Marcus felt the void steel rings growing impossibly heavy as reality itself seemed to groan under the strain. But in that moment of crisis, he remembered something else Bernard had taught him. Not about metal or combat, but about the nature of power itself. True strength, his master had said, comes not from dominating forces, but from understanding their essential nature. Looking at the void steel rings, still spinning between them, despite the overwhelming pressure, Marcus suddenly saw what they had been missing. The rings weren't just controlling the energy or redirecting it, they were showing them its true nature, its deepest purpose, and in that understanding lay the key to everything that would follow. The Shadow Priest moved closer to Mei Lin and Wei, its form rippling with barely contained power. Your hearts are pure, but purity alone is not enough. The dynasty understood that transformation requires sacrifice. Great change demands great cost. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus felt Mei Lin's response. Not fear, but a healer's intuitive understanding. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady. True transformation doesn't destroy what came before. It builds upon it, like a plant growing from fertile soil. Wei stepped forward, holding up one of his glowing herbs. Look at these cave flowers. They transform darkness into light not through destruction, but through harmony. Each balances the other, creating something greater than either alone. The Shadow Priest hesitated, its ancient certainty wavering as it confronted this simple truth. In that moment of doubt, Marcus felt something shift in the Heart Forge's resonance. The patterns carved into its surface began emitting a soft luminescence, responding to Mei Lin and Wei's insight. Above ground, Bernard noticed the change as well. The void steel, he gasped. It's not fighting the energy anymore, it's starting to sing with it. Brother Ash's eyes widened with sudden understanding. The Phoenix dynasty tried to force transformation through dominance. But the Shadowless Forge knew a deeper truth. True change comes through harmony, through finding the resonance between opposing forces. The Shadow Priest raised its hands again, dark energy swirling around it. You know nothing of true power. Let me show you what the dynasty's wisdom can achieve. It began an ancient incantation, words that made the very air shiver with malevolent force. But Marcus, watching through the shadow steel link, saw something the ancient being had missed. As it gathered its power, its own shadow was responding to the Heart Forge's light in unexpected ways. The harder it tried to enforce its will, the more its own nature worked against it. Mei Lin, he sent through their connection. The Forge's petals, they're like mirrors. Use them. She understood immediately. While the Shadow Priest was focused on its dark conjuring, she and Wei began adjusting the massive metal petals, angling them to reflect the Forge's growing light in specific patterns. Each reflection created new geometries of illumination that matched the void steel rings spinning dance above. The Shadow Priest's incantation faltered as it found itself surrounded by an ever-shifting mandala of light and shadow. Its own power became part of the pattern, drawn into the greater harmony despite its resistance. Impossible, it whispered, its voice losing its otherworldly resonance. Our calculations were perfect. Our understanding is absolute. Your understanding was incomplete, Bernard called down through their shared connection. You sought to master shadow by destroying light, but never understood that each defines the other. True mastery lies in maintaining the eternal dance between them. The Heart Forge's crystal core began pulsing more rapidly, its frequency matching the void steel rings. Spin. The luminescent veins throughout the chamber glowed brighter, their light neither harsh nor blinding, but perfectly balanced with the shadows they created. Above ground, Victor noticed the change first. The shadows, he called out. They're not fighting anymore, they're transforming. The dark energy that had been trying to break free was indeed changing, but not in the way the Phoenix dynasty had intended. Instead of becoming pure shadow, it was finding a new equilibrium. The mysterious creatures it had formed began shifting, their substance neither fully dark nor fully light, but something in between. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus felt Mei Lin and Wei reaching the Heartforge's deepest controls. Ancient machinery responded to their touch, accepting them as worthy operators after witnessing their understanding of true balance. The Shadow Priest made one final attempt to intervene, launching itself toward the forge's core. But as it passed, through the intersecting patterns of light and shadow, something unexpected happened. Instead of disrupting the emerging harmony, it became part of it. Centuries of preserved power began flowing into the forge's transformative matrix. The final ingredient, Brother Ash breathed, not taken by force but freely given through understanding. The void steel rings suddenly felt lighter in Marcus and Bernard's hands, as if reality itself was releasing its tension. The geometry of their spin shifted slightly, incorporating this new development into its endless dance of pattern and counter-pattern. But victory wasn't assured yet. As the Heartforge's power reached its peak, Marcus sensed a new challenge emerging. The transformed energy needed direction, purpose. Like molten metal flowing from a crucible, it required skilled hands to guide it into its final form. The mountain, Bernard said suddenly. The ancient fortress wasn't just built here by chance. The whole valley is part of a larger pattern. Through their various connections, the void steel, the shadow steel link, and the awakened Heartforge, they all saw it at once. The valley's natural geometry, the placement of ruins and caves, even the underground springs. Everything formed part of a vast design. The Phoenix dynasty had tried to use this pattern to enforce darkness, but the Shadowless Forge had left their own mark, preparing the way for a different kind of transformation, one that wouldn't dominate the natural order but work in harmony with it. Now, as power flowed through these ancient channels, everything depended on guiding it correctly. One mistake could still unleash devastation, but handled properly, this energy could restore something long lost, a perfect balance between light and shadow, between creation and preservation, between change and continuity. Marcus felt the weight of this responsibility settling over him like a freshly forged blade, heavy with purpose but perfectly balanced for the task at hand. Through the shadow steel link, he sensed Mei Lin and Wei's determination matching his own. Above and below, master and apprentice, smith and healer, warrior and sage, all had their part to play in the coming moments. The Heartforge's crystal core pulsed once more, and the final phase of transformation began. The final transformation began like a sunrise, not a sudden burst of light, but a gradual illumination that changed everything it touched. The Heartforge's crystal core pulsed with rhythmic energy, each beat sending waves of power through the valley's hidden geometry. Marcus and Bernard maintained their positions with the void steel rings, but their role had shifted. Instead of containing or controlling the energy, they were now helping to guide its natural flow, like riverbanks directing water to the sea. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus witnessed Mei Lin and Wei working at the Heartforge's controls with intuitive precision. His training in metalwork merged with their knowledge of natural harmony, creating something entirely new. The ancient machinery responded to their touch as if it had been waiting centuries for exactly this combination of understanding. The patterns, Brother Ash observed watching the void steel rings dance. They're not just geometric anymore. They're organic, growing like living things. He was right. The perfectly calculated angles and measurements of the ring's spin had begun incorporating curves and spirals that mimicked natural growth. Each new pattern emerged from the previous one, like branches from a tree or petals from a flower, Above ground, the transformation manifested in extraordinary ways. The shadow creatures that had threatened the village were changing, their substance neither dark nor light, but something in between. They began taking new forms, shapes that reflected the natural world rather than nightmare visions. Victor and his reformed Brotherhood warriors watched in amazement as the beings they had feared became beautiful and strange, like living sculptures. Of twilight, they moved through the air with fluid grace, their presence now inspiring wonder rather than terror. The Phoenix dynasty tried to create their own reality, Bernard said, his voice carrying fresh understanding. But they never realized that the most powerful transformations come from working with what already exists. In the depths, the shadow. Priest's form had completely merged with the Heartforge's matrix, but instead of being destroyed, it was being transformed. Centuries of accumulated knowledge and power were being redistributed through the valley's natural channels, finding new purpose in the emerging harmony. Mei Lin's voice came through the shadow steel link, filled with discovery. The forge, it's not just changing the energy. It's learning from it, adapting its own patterns to create something greater than either force alone. She was right. The Heartforge's petals had begun moving in new ways, incorporating organic movements into their mechanical precision. The luminescent veins throughout the chamber pulsed with colors that had no names, each one perfectly balanced between light and shadow. Wei understood the implications first. Like mixing medicines, he said, through their connection. Sometimes, combining two elements creates something entirely new, with properties neither possessed alone. Marcus felt a shift in the void steel rings as this new understanding flowed through their shared awareness. The mysterious metal began singing with a different voice, not the pure, sharp notes of perfect geometry, but a more complex harmony that contained both order and chaos, structure and flow. But as the transformation accelerated, new challenges emerged. The valley's ancient pattern was vast and intricate, and not all of it had weathered the centuries equally. Some channels were blocked, others damaged by time and neglect. The transformed energy needed help finding its way through these broken passages, the shadow steel tokens, Marcus realized. The ones we gave to the villagers, they can serve as bridges across the damaged sections. Elder Chen understood immediately. He began coordinating the villagers and Brotherhood members, positioning them strategically around the valley. Each token became a stepping stone in the larger pattern, helping to maintain the flow of energy. Through their various connections, Marcus sensed another development in the Heartforge chamber. The transformed Shadow Priest's knowledge was integrating with the Forge's mechanisms, revealing secrets that had been lost for centuries. Ancient wisdom merged with new understanding, creating possibilities that neither the Phoenix dynasty nor the Shadowless Forge had imagined. It's not just about balancing light and shadow, Brother Ash said with growing excitement. It's about transcending the distinction between them entirely, creating something that exists in the spaces between, something that partakes of both, natures while being bound by neither. As if in response to his words, the void steel rings began emitting a new kind of light, not the harsh glare of pure illumination or the consuming darkness of shadow, but a gentle radiance that seemed to reveal the true nature of everything it touched. In that light, Marcus saw his master with fresh clarity. Bernard stood straight and strong, his apparent age and infirmity falling away as the transformation touched him. But the change wasn't physical. It was a revelation of something that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface like the true grain of well-forged steel. Through the shadow steel link, he felt Mei Lin experiencing a similar revelation. Her connection to the Heartforge had shown her that her own talents, her understanding of healing and growth, her ability to sense the subtle harmonies of nature, were just as vital as any warrior's skills or smith's craft. The transformed, Energy continued flowing through the valley's pattern, but now it moved with purpose and direction. Wherever it touched, it left behind subtle changes. The ancient fortress ruins began stabilizing, their weathered stones finding new strength not through restoration, but through transformation. The cave systems that honeycombed the mountains shifted slightly, their passages adjusting to create perfect resonance with the Earth's natural rhythms. Even the air itself was changing, becoming charged with potential that everyone could sense. It was like the moment before a storm breaks, but instead of lightning and thunder, it promised something entirely new, a form of power that worked with nature rather than trying to dominate it. Victor, watching the transformation unfold, turned to his former warriors with newfound purpose. "We sought power through conquest," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "But true strength was here all along, in the balance between forces, in the harmony of opposing principles." The Brotherhood members nodded in understanding. Their experiences, both as agents of shadow and witnesses to this transformation, had given them unique insight. They would have an important role to play in what was to come, helping others understand the delicate balance between light and shadow. In the depths, Mei Lin and Wei had begun the Heart Forge's final sequence. The crystal cores pulsing had reached a fever pitch, its energy synchronized perfectly with the void steel rings above. Through their connection, Marcus felt them preparing for the culminating moment of the transformation. But something else was happening too, something unexpected but somehow right. The knowledge preserved by the Shadow Priest, combined with the Heartforge's ancient wisdom and their own hard-won understanding, was creating a new kind of legacy. Not one of dominance and control, but of harmony and growth. The Shadowless Forge didn't end with the Phoenix Dynasty's fall, Brother Ash realized. It's been waiting all this time, preparing for this moment of renewal. Bernard nodded, his eyes bright with the same understanding. Every master passes their knowledge to their apprentice, hoping it will grow into something greater. This is no different, just on a larger scale. Marcus felt the truth of their words resonating through the void steel rings. Everything he had learned, every lesson and technique, had been leading to this moment. But the true test wasn't in mastering these skills. It was in understanding how to use them to create something new, something that would carry the best of the past forward. While transforming it into something greater, the Heartforge's crystal core flared with sudden intensity, and through the Shadowsteel link, Marcus felt Mei Lin's urgent warning. Something's changing in the deep passages, the transformation. It's awakening things that have slept for centuries. She was right. Throughout the mountain's hidden chambers, ancient mechanisms were stirring to life, but these weren't the defensive systems they'd encountered before. These were something far older and stranger, devices created by the first masters of the Shadowless Forge, designed to activate only when true harmony was achieved. The resonance engines, Brother Ash breathed in wonder. They were said to be the Forge's greatest creation, machines that could shape reality itself by finding the perfect harmony between all forces. But they were never completed. No, Bernard corrected, his voice carrying deep understanding. They were completed, but they needed the right moment, the right combination of understanding and power to achieve their true purpose. Through their various connections, they all sensed it. Vast energies shifting in the mountain's depths as the resonance engines began their work. The transformed power flowing through the valley's pattern was being caught up in new geometries, folded through dimensions that existed between light and shadow. Wei's expertise with natural harmonies proved crucial as they navigated these changes. It's like watching a flower bloom in the space between moments, he sent through their link. Each petal opens to reveal another layer of possibility. The void steel rings responded to these new developments. their spin incorporating increasingly complex patterns. Marcus and Bernard found themselves guided by instinct and training as they helped maintain the delicate balance. Each movement had to be perfect, each adjustment precisely timed. Above ground, the effects were incredible to witness. The transformed shadow creatures began interacting with the resonance engine's power, becoming living expressions of the harmony. Being forged below, they moved through the air like aurora borealis given form, their substance neither matter nor energy, but something that partook of both natures. Victor and his warriors watched in amazement as these beings began helping to stabilize the valley's transformation. Where the ancient pattern was damaged, they would flow into the gaps, their transformed essence serving as living bridges between broken connections. They're not just mindless forces anymore, Victor realized. They've become guardians themselves, protectors of the balance we're creating. Elder Chen, coordinating the villagers' efforts with their shadow steel tokens, noticed something else. The tokens, they're changing too, growing into something more than what they were. He was right. The protective tokens Bernard had distributed were evolving, their substance responding to the resonance engine's influence. Each one became a miniature nexus of transformed power, helping to anchor the new reality being born around them. In the heart-forged chamber, Mei Lin and Wei worked with increasing confidence as they integrated these developments into their efforts. The forge's petals had become like living things, moving with organic grace while maintaining mechanical precision. The luminescent veins throughout the chamber pulsed with colors that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the Shadow Priest's transformed knowledge revealed one final challenge. The resonance engines weren't just reshaping the present, they were reaching through time itself, attempting to heal ancient wounds in the fabric of reality. The Phoenix Dynasty's ritual, Brother Ash explained, understanding flowing through their shared awareness. It didn't just fail. It created a tear in the natural order, a wound that has been festering for centuries. That's why shadow and light became so imbalanced. Marcus felt this truth resonating through the void steel rings. Every strange event, every manifestation of unnatural power had been a symptom of this ancient injury. Now the resonance engines were trying to mend it, using their transformed energy as a healing force. But such healing required anchors, points of perfect stability around which the restoration could occur. The villagers with their evolved tokens formed part of this pattern. Victor's reformed warriors, with their unique experience of both shadow and light, formed another. Yet something more was needed. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus sensed Mei Lin's realization. The heart forge, she sent. It needs to become a permanent nexus of balance. But that requires a binding, Bernard finished. Someone to maintain the harmony, to ensure the balance never tips too far in either direction again. Brother Ash stepped forward, his purpose clear. That was always the true role of the Shadowless Forge, not just to work metal and magic, but to serve as guardians of equilibrium. I offer myself as the first of the new binding. But he wasn't alone in this dedication. Throughout the valley, others stepped forward, villagers who had discovered their own connections to the balance, brotherhood warriors who had learned the cost of disrupting it, even the transformed shadow creatures themselves. Each offered their own form of commitment to maintaining the new harmony being forged. The void steel rings hummed with approval as these pledges were made, their song becoming ever more complex and beautiful. The resonance engine's power flowed through every offered anchor point, creating a living network of balance and transformation that would endure long after this day. Marcus felt something shifting in his own understanding as well. His training as both smith and warrior had prepared him for more than just this moment. It had shown him a path forward, a way to help guide and protect this new reality they were creating. Through their connection, he sensed Mei Lin experiencing a similar revelation. Her healer's wisdom would be vital in maintaining this harmony, in understanding how to nurture and grow the delicate balance they had achieved. The Heart Forge's crystal core pulsed once more, and the final phase of the resonance engine's work began. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as ancient wounds began to heal, as shadow and light found new ways to dance together. As the legacy of both the Phoenix dynasty and the Shadowless Forge was transformed into something entirely new and wonderful, the resonance engine's final phase manifested in ways none of them had expected. Instead of a thunderous culmination, the transformation spread through the valley with the subtle inevitability of dawn breaking over the mountains. The merged energies of shadow and light began to settle into new patterns, creating a reality that was both familiar and wonderfully strange. Through the void, steel rings, Marcus sensed changes occurring at the deepest level of existence. The ancient fortress ruins weren't just being stabilized, they were becoming something entirely new. The weathered stones now held both shadow and light within their substance, allowing them to serve as natural conduits for the balanced forces. Flowing through the valley, the mountain itself is becoming a forge, Bernard observed, his trained senses detecting the subtle shifts in the rock around them. Not just for shaping metal, but for maintaining the harmony we've created. In the depths, Mei Lin and Wei witnessed the Heart Forge's ultimate transformation through their connection to its ancient mechanisms. The massive petals that had opened like a metal flower now began integrating with the living rock, becoming part of the mountain's natural structure while maintaining their mystical properties. It's no longer just a machine, Mei Lin sent through their link. It's becoming more like a heart in truth, pumping the forces of balance through the valley's veins. The transformed shadow creatures provided unexpected assistance in this process. Their fluid nature, neither fully material nor purely energy, allowed them to flow through the stone itself, strengthening the new patterns being established. Where they passed, they left behind traces of their harmony, subtle markings that glowed with inner light while casting shadows that seemed to dance. Victor, watching this process from above, noticed something remarkable about these markings. "They're like the patterns on the void steel," he called out, "but they're growing, changing, telling new stories with every passing moment." Brother Ash nodded in understanding. The Shadowless Forge's greatest wisdom is writing itself into the world around us, not as fixed laws carved in metal, but as living principles that can adapt and grow. The evolved shadow steel tokens carried by the villagers began responding to these changes in unique ways. Each token developed its own distinctive resonance, attuned to both its bearer's nature and its location within the valley's larger pattern. Together, they formed a network of harmonious points that helped stabilize the ongoing transformation. But it was in the Heart-Forged chamber that the most profound changes were occurring. The ancient shadow priests' transformed knowledge, fully integrated with the Forge's systems, revealed possibilities that even the original builders hadn't imagined. The crystal core no longer simply pulsed with power. It had become a lens through which reality itself could be perceived and gently guided. Wei, drawing on his herbalist's wisdom, recognized something familiar in these developments. "It's like watching an ecosystem heal itself," he said through their connection. "Each part supports the others, creating something greater than the sum of its parts." Marcus and Bernard maintained their work with the void steel rings, but their role had evolved. Instead of actively directing the transformation, they now served more like skilled gardeners, nurturing the natural growth of forces while pruning away any dangerous imbalances. "This was always the true purpose of our craft," Bernard said softly, his voice carrying fresh insight. not to impose our will on metal or magic, but to understand the natural harmony inherent in all things and help it flourish. Through their various connections, they all sensed a new presence emerging, not a single entity, but a collective awareness, born from the interaction of all the transformed elements. The resonance engines had awakened something that transcended individual consciousness while respecting and preserving it. The valley is becoming aware of itself, Brother Ash breathed in wonder, not as we are aware, but in its own unique way. The Phoenix dynasty sought to dominate reality, but they never understood that reality itself is alive and conscious. This awareness brought new challenges and opportunities. The transformed shadow creatures began organizing themselves into patterns that reflected this greater consciousness, becoming something like the valley's immune system, detecting and gently correcting any disruptions to the newly established harmony. Victor and his reformed Brotherhood warriors found themselves naturally falling into a similar role, but focused on the human elements of the balance. Their experience with both shadow and light gave them unique insight into maintaining equilibrium between the transformed reality and those who would interact with it. We'll need guides, Victor realized. People who can help others understand and respect this new harmony, not through force or fear, but through demonstration and understanding. Elder Chen, who had been coordinating the villagers' efforts with their evolved tokens, saw even further implications. Ravencroft won't just be a village anymore, he said thoughtfully. It's becoming a school, a sanctuary, a place where people can learn to live in harmony with these transformed forces. Meanwhile, in the Heartforge chamber, Mei Lin made an extraordinary discovery. The Forge's transformed mechanisms weren't just maintaining the current balance. They were adapting, learning, preparing for future challenges. The crystal core had begun generating new patterns, like seeds of harmony waiting to be planted in other places. The transformation doesn't have to stop here, she sent through their link, her excitement palpable. We can help it spread, not by forcing it, but by nurturing it where conditions are right. Marcus felt the truth of her words resonating through the void steel rings. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning, the first step in a longer journey toward a world where shadow and light could dance together in endless creative combinations. But such potential carried great responsibility. The power to help reality transform itself had to be handled with wisdom and restraint. Through their shared connections, they all understood that maintaining this balance would require constant attention and care. Brother Ash stepped forward, his role as the first of the new binding taking on clearer shape. The shadowless forge will be reborn, he declared, not as a secret society of metalworkers and warriors, but as guardians of harmony, teachers of balance. We'll preserve the key wisdom of both shadow and light, helping others find their own path between them. The Void Steel Ring's song changed subtly, incorporating this new purpose into their endless dance of patterns. Marcus and Bernard felt their own roles shifting, evolving. They would remain craftsmen, working with metal and teaching apprentices, but now their forge would serve a deeper purpose, helping to maintain and spread the harmony they had helped create. Through the Shadow Steel link, Marcus sensed Mei Lin and Wei making similar adjustments to their own practices. Their medicines and herbs would take on new properties, guided by their understanding of the balance between forces. The Heartforge's wisdom would inform their healing arts, creating treatments that worked with both the physical and energetic aspects of life. The transformed reality settling around them felt both ancient and new, like a long-forgotten truth finally remembered and given fresh expression. The mountain valley had become a crucible for something extraordinary, a place where the boundaries between craftsmanship and magic, between physical and spiritual, had dissolved into a greater whole. But perhaps most remarkably, this transformation had occurred not through conquest or control, but through understanding and harmony. The Phoenix dynasty's dream of reshaping reality had been achieved, but in a way they could never have imagined, through cooperation rather than dominance, through balance rather than force. As the transformed reality continued to settle into its new patterns, Marcus noticed something extraordinary happening with the void steel rings. The mysterious metal had begun absorbing and reflecting the essence of the changes around them, its surface now showing not just geometric patterns but living images, glimpses of potential futures, paths that could be explored as this new harmony grew and spread. "The rings are becoming more than tools," Brother Ash observed. "They're turning into windows through which we can perceive the deeper currents of balance and transformation." Through their connection to the Heart Forge, Mei Lin sent an urgent realization. The crystal core is responding to the rings. It's like they're having a conversation, teaching each other new ways to maintain harmony. Indeed, with each passing moment, the interaction between the void steel rings and the Heart Forge's core grew more complex and beautiful. Patterns of light and shadow danced between them, creating mandalas of pure possibility that wrote themselves into the fabric of reality. Wei, drawing on his decades of herbal wisdom, recognized something profound in these patterns. Look at how they mirror the growth spirals of certain rare plants, the ones that only bloom in perfect balance between light and dark. Nature has always known these truths. We're just learning to see them. Victor and his warriors, still maintaining their protective circle around the village, witnessed another remarkable development. The transformed shadow creatures had begun interacting with the valley's plant life in unexpected ways. Where they passed, flowers bloomed with new properties, petals that shimmered between shadow and light, leaves that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Life itself is learning to express harmony," Victor marveled. "These aren't just changes in energy or consciousness, they're becoming part of the natural world." Elder Chen, whose evolved shadow steel token had grown particularly attuned to these developments, noticed patterns emerging in the village itself. The arrangements of buildings, the flow of daily activities, even the way people moved through spaces, all were unconsciously adjusting to reflect the new harmony. "The village is becoming like a living mandala," he realized, each part moving in perfect relation to the others, creating something greater than any individual element. In the Heart Forge chamber, Mei Lin and Wei had discovered another layer of transformation. The ancient machinery, now fully integrated with the mountain's living rock, had begun generating what looked like seeds, tiny crystalline structures that contained the essence of harmony in concentrated form. "These could be planted in other places," Mei Lin sent through their link, her healer's intuition grasping the implications. "Not to force transformation, but to nurture it where the conditions are right." Bernard nodded in understanding. "Like setting up a new forge, you don't just need the right tools and materials. You need to understand the space, the flow of air, the natural rhythms of the place." Through the void steel rings, Marcus perceived deeper implications. These seeds weren't just carriers of power or knowledge. They were potential catalysts for natural transformation. Each one would develop differently, depending on where and how it was nurtured, ensuring that future harmonies would grow in unique and appropriate ways. The Phoenix dynasty tried to create a single, dominant pattern, Brother Ash reflected. But true harmony allows for infinite variations, each perfect in its own way. The transformed Shadow Priest's knowledge, now fully integrated into the Heart Forge's systems, revealed another truth. The ancient ones who built these mechanisms hadn't been working toward a final fixed state. They had been trying to create the conditions for endless creative evolution, a dynamic balance that could grow and adapt forever. This understanding rippled through their shared awareness, changing how they all saw their roles in what was to come. The void steel ring's dance became more fluid, incorporating this principle of eternal growth into their patterns. The heart forge's crystal core pulsed with new rhythms, like a heart learning to beat in time with a greater music. Even the resonance engines, those vast and mysterious devices awakened in the mountain's depths, began adjusting their work. Instead of trying to establish a permanent, unchanging harmony, they were creating frameworks within which new harmonies could endlessly emerge and evolve. Victor, watching his transformed warriors interact with these changes, saw the practical implications. "We'll need to learn how to grow with this new reality," he said. "Not just protect it, but help it flourish in ways we might not even imagine yet." The shadow creatures themselves seemed to grasp this concept, their fluid forms, now expressing not just balance between light and dark, but the infinite possibilities that lay between and beyond such simple dualities. They moved through the air like living art, each motion suggesting new ways of seeing and being. Wei, drawing on his experience with helping things grow, recognized the importance of this endless adaptability. In nature, the healthiest systems are those that can change and adapt while maintaining their essential balance. That's what we're becoming part of, not a fixed state, but a living, breathing harmony that can evolve with need and circumstance. Through the shadow steel link, Marcus felt Maylin's excitement as she discovered yet another aspect of the Heartforge's transformation. The ancient mechanisms weren't just generating seeds of harmony, they were creating templates for new kinds of forges, new ways of working with the balance between forces. Each place that accepts a seed will develop its own unique expression of harmony, she sent, like different gardens growing from the same type of seed but adapting to local conditions. This revelation sparked new understanding in Marcus. Every lesson Bernard had taught him about metalwork suddenly appeared in a fresh light. The way different metals could be combined to create alloys with new properties, how proper tempering required understanding both heat and cold, how the finest blades contained countless carefully folded layers. All were expressions of the same fundamental principles they were now seeing on a grand scale. "We're not just maintaining balance," he realized. "We're becoming part of an endless creative process, one that will continue to unfold in ways we can barely imagine." Bernard smiled at his apprentice's insight. "That's the true legacy of both smith and assassin, not the power to destroy or create, but the wisdom to know how forces can dance together to make something greater than either alone." As the newly transformed reality settled into its rhythms, the mountain valley of Ravencroft entered its first evening of true harmony. The sun's setting rays played through air that seemed somehow clearer, creating shadows that danced with purpose rather than threatening darkness. The void steel ring's song had softened to a gentle hum, maintaining balance with the subtle precision of a master craftsman's finishing touches. Marcus and Bernard finally lowered their tired arms, the rings settling into a stable orbit between them like miniature moons. Through the shadow steel link, they sensed Mei Lin and Wei emerging from the Heartforged chamber, their faces glowing with more than just the crystal core's reflected light. "It's done," Brother Ash announced quietly, his voice carrying both exhaustion and wonder, though perhaps begun would be more accurate. The transformed shadow creatures drifted through the evening air like aurora borealis given form, their substance now permanently balanced between light and dark. They had already begun their new role as guardians, moving through the valley in complex patterns that strengthened and maintained the harmony they'd helped create. Victor approached the smithy, his former Brotherhood warriors, spread out behind him in a respectful semicircle. The hardened mercenary leader looked somehow younger, as if laying down his burden of violence had restored something long lost. "We've sent riders to the other mountain villages," he reported, "not to threaten or demand, but to invite and explain. People need to know what's happened here, What's possible when balance is chosen over dominance? Elder Chen nodded approvingly, his evolved shadow steel token gleaming with inner light. Ravencroft will become a place of learning, he said, not just for metalwork or combat, but for understanding the deeper harmonies that connect all things. Through their various connections, they all sensed the truth of his words. The valley had become something unique, a living example of what could happen when opposing forces found balance rather than conflict. The ancient fortress ruins, now stabilized and transformed, would serve as both school and sanctuary for those seeking to understand these mysteries. Mei Lin moved closer to Marcus, her presence bringing a different kind of harmony to his tired spirit. "The Heart Forge showed us something remarkable," she said softly. "The seeds of harmony it's creating, they're not just carrying power or knowledge, they're carrying potential. Like unforged metal," Marcus understood, his craftsman's wisdom merging with these new insights. The final shape depends on how they're nurtured, what understanding guides their growth. Wei joined them, his herbalist's bag now containing several of the crystalline seeds. "Each one will grow differently, depending on where it's planted," he explained. "Just as the same herb can become medicine or poison, depending on how it's prepared and used." Bernard watched this exchange with quiet pride, seeing how his apprentice had grown beyond mere technical mastery to true understanding. The old master's form seemed to shift in the evening light, sometimes appearing as the humble blacksmith, sometimes revealing hints of the legendary phantom blade, but always fundamentally himself. "You've surpassed my teachings," he told Marcus warmly. "I taught you to balance force with precision, to understand the voice of metal and shadow. But you've learned something I never fully grasped, how to help opposing forces find their own harmony." Brother Ash, preparing for his new role as the first of the binding, added his own observation. "The Shadowless Forge sought to master the imbalance between light and shadow. The Phoenix dynasty tried to dominate it, but you've shown us a third path, how to nurture harmony while letting it grow in its own way. As night fell fully, the valley revealed new wonders. The transformed reality expressed itself in subtle ways, stars that seemed to shine with both light and shadow, plants that glowed with inner radiance while casting shadows that moved like liquid silver, air that carried whispers of ancient wisdom made new. Victor's warriors, who had once served darkness out of fear and ambition, found themselves naturally falling into the role of protectors. Their experience with both shadow and light gave them unique insight into maintaining the balance they had helped create. "We'll need to establish way stations," Victor mused, already planning for the future. "Places where travelers can rest and learn about what's happened here. The transformation will attract both the curious and the powerful. We need to be ready to guide some and gently discourage others." Elder Chen agreed, adding, "The village council will help coordinate these efforts. Ravencroft has always been a trading stop along the mountain routes. Now we'll trade in wisdom as well as goods." The void steel rings pulsed softly, responding to these plans with harmonious resonance. Through them, Marcus sensed the larger pattern taking shape, not a rigid structure imposed from above, but a living network of connections growing organically. From this first seed of transformation, Mei Lin, her healer's intuition enhanced by her experience with the Heart Forge, saw even further implications. "The balance we've created here isn't just about power or knowledge," she said. "It's about showing a new way of being, how to live in harmony with forces that others try to control or deny." Wei nodded, understanding flowing through their shared awareness. "Like the most effective medicines, this transformation works by supporting natural processes, not by forcing change. Each person who encounters it will respond in their own way, find their own balance. The transformed Shadow Priest's knowledge, now fully integrated into the Heartforge's systems, had revealed that this had always been the true potential hidden in reality. The Phoenix Dynasty's mistake wasn't in seeking transformation, but in trying to control its direction. True change, like true craft, required understanding and cooperation with the essential nature of things. Marcus felt this truth resonating through every lesson Bernard had taught him. The way metal had to be respected and understood before it could be shaped, how the finest blades emerged from cooperation between smith and substance, the balance between strength and flexibility that made true mastery possible. "The forge will remain our center," he said, looking at his master, "but what we craft here will serve a greater purpose." Bernard smiled, his weathered face reflecting both pride and peace. "Every master hopes their apprentice will surpass them," he said quietly, "but you've done more than that. You've helped forge a new way forward, one that honors the past while transforming it into something greater." The void steel rings shifted their dance slightly, incorporating this exchange into their endless patterns. The Heartforge's crystal core pulsed in harmony, sending waves of balanced energy through the valley's transformed geometry. The shadow creatures moved in response, their fluid forms expressing the beauty of this new reality. Brother Ash, watching, these interactions saw the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, not as they had been originally understood, but as they were always meant to be. The Shadowless Forge spoke of a time when shadow and light would find perfect balance, he said. But they never realized it wouldn't come through mastery or dominance. It would come through understanding and growth. As the first stars emerged fully in the darkening sky, Marcus felt the weight of the future settling around him like a well-forged blade, heavy with purpose, but perfectly balanced for the task ahead. The transformation they had achieved here was just the beginning. Each day would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help this harmony grow and spread. Maylin took his hand, her touch bringing its own kind of balance to his thoughts. Together, they watched the transformed valley settle into its new patterns. The ancient fortress ruins, once a symbol of power and control, now stood as a testament to the possibility of change and renewal. The mountain paths that had once carried threats now promised to bring seekers of wisdom and understanding. The legacy of both the Phoenix Dynasty and the Shadowless Forge had been transformed, just as the Shadow Priest's ancient knowledge had been transformed. Not destroyed or forgotten, but renewed and reborn into something that honored truth while growing beyond old limitations. As night fully embraced the valley, the transformed reality continued its endless dance of balance and possibility. The story of the blacksmith's apprentice, who had learned secrets from a legendary assassin, had become something larger, a tale of how true strength lies not in mastering forces, but in helping them find their own harmony. And in the gentle darkness, under stars that shone with both light and shadow, new stories were already beginning to unfold. In the days that followed, Ravencroft underwent subtle but profound changes. The smithy, once a simple workshop, evolved into something far more significant. Marcus and Bernard continued their metalwork, but each piece they crafted now carried traces of the harmony they'd helped create. Simple tools became conduits for balance, everyday objects transformed into subtle teachers of deeper truths. One morning, as Marcus worked the forge under his master's watchful eye, a group of children gathered at the workshop's entrance. Among them was Jimmy, the baker's son, who had always been fascinated by the smithy's work. The boy's eyes widened as he watched the metal take shape under Marcus's hammer. "The metal," Jimmy gasped. "It's singing." Bernard smiled, recognizing that the boy could perceive the subtle harmonics they now worked into every piece. "Would you like to learn?" he asked, sharing a knowing look with Marcus. "Not just about metal, but about the music it contains." This became the pattern as Ravencroft grew into its new role. Knowledge was passed on not through formal lessons alone, but through practical demonstration and direct experience. Way's herb shop became another center of learning, where he and Maylene taught others to understand the balance inherent in natural medicines. The transformed shadow creatures proved to be unexpected teachers as well. Their fluid forms demonstrated principles of harmony that words could never fully express. Children especially seemed able to grasp these lessons, learning to see the beauty in balance rather than fearing the dark. Victor and his reformed brotherhood established a network of guardians throughout the mountain passes, but rather than serving as mere defenders, they became guides for those drawn to Ravencroft's transformation. Their own journey from shadow to balance made them uniquely qualified to help others understand the changes they would encounter. Each person responds differently, Victor explained to his warriors. Some see only the surface changes, the strange lights, the living shadows. Others sense the deeper transformation. Our role is to help each find their own path to understanding. The Heart Forge's seeds of harmony began their work as well. Wei and Mei Lin carefully selected locations where the first few would be planted, choosing places where the natural balance was already strong. Each seed developed differently, responding to local conditions and needs. In a valley to the east, a seed sprouted into a grove of trees whose leaves shifted between shadow and light, creating spaces where opposing forces could find natural equilibrium. In a western mountain pass, another seed transformed an ancient shrine into a place where travelers could experience perfect harmony between internal and external forces. Brother Ash, serving as the first of the new binding, traveled between these emerging centers of transformation. His role was not to direct or control, but to observe and nurture, helping each location develop its own unique expression of balance. The void steel rings remained in Ravencroft, suspended above the Heart Forge's crystal core in a permanent dance of perfect geometry. But they were no longer just tools or weapons. They had become teachers in their own right, their endless patterns demonstrating principles of harmony to those ready to understand. Marcus found his role evolving as well. While he remained first and foremost a craftsman, his work now included helping others recognize the subtle harmonies present in everyday life. Each swing of his hammer became a lesson, each shaped piece of metal a demonstration of how opposing forces could work together. The finest blade, he would tell his students, isn't the one that cuts most deeply, but the one that finds perfect balance between strength and flexibility, between edge and spine, between the smith's will and the metal's nature. Mei Lin's healing work took on new dimensions as she integrated the Heart Forge's wisdom with traditional medicine. She discovered that many ailments stemmed from imbalance rather than simple illness, and her treatments began addressing both physical and energetic harmony. Even the villagers who had wielded the Shadow Steel tokens found themselves transformed by the experience. The tokens had evolved into permanent touchstones, helping their bearers maintain personal harmony while contributing to the valley's larger balance. Elder Chen, whose token had grown particularly attuned to community needs, became adept at helping the village adapt to its new role. Under his guidance, Ravencroft developed ways to welcome seekers of wisdom while preserving the peace and balance they had achieved. The transformed Shadow Priest's knowledge, fully integrated into the Heart Forge, continued to reveal new insights. But unlike the Phoenix Dynasty's forced revelations, these truths emerged naturally, each understanding arising when minds and hearts were ready to receive it. Bernard, watching all these developments, found deep satisfaction in how his two legacies had merged and transformed. The skills of the Phantom Blade had not been lost but transcended, becoming part of a greater wisdom about balance and harmony. "I once used shadow to change the world through death," he told Marcus one evening as they worked late at the forge. "Now we use harmony to transform it through life and growth." The ancient fortress ruins, once a symbol of power and conflict, became a living archive where the story of Ravencroft's transformation was preserved. But it wasn't just a record of past events. The very stones continued to evolve, their patterns shifting subtly to reflect new understanding as it emerged. As seasons passed, the transformation proved to be not a single event, but an ongoing process. Each day brought new discoveries, new expressions of harmony between forces that others saw as opposed. The balance they had forged proved to be not a static achievement, but a living, growing thing. Travelers who reached Ravencroft often found more than they expected. Some came seeking power or secret knowledge, only to discover that true strength lay in understanding rather than control. Others arrived by chance, drawn by rumors or curiosity, and found their lives transformed by what they experienced. The mountain valley had become a crucible of continuous transformation, where the wisdom of the Shadowless Forge and the power of the Phoenix dynasty had been transformed into something entirely new. A living demonstration of how opposition could become harmony, how conflict could lead to creation, how the darkest shadows and brightest lights could dance together in endless beautiful patterns. And at the center of it all, in a humble smithy where the ring of hammer on anvil still marked the rhythm of days, a former assassin and his apprentice continued their work, not just shaping metal, but helping to forge a future where balance and harmony showed the way forward for all who were ready to learn. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.